you use
Okay.
mics, or you
No,
want
I'm teasing. I'm teasing you.
without the mic?
It's on duplicate, yeah, but,
Okay, so this guy. Yeah, the one
Oh, okay.
selected. Nope.
oh,
nope.
sorry.
The one.
This,
Yep.
okay, all right.
Very good. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. This thing goes.
We're not gonna buy this.
Yeah, we're gonna introduce
It's okay.
ourselves.
They know themselves better than I know.
Maybe.
I hope.
Okay, we're ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready to go if everyone else is ready to go. Got your seats. One last straggler. Put the seats up here in the front. I'm trying to sell them. Nobody's taking me up on it. I'm gonna sit up here by myself. You're not even staying. So we've got Russ up here from Genesis and Trish from I forget.
Tucson Electric Power.
Tucson Electric Power. Take it away. You
All
wanna
righty.
introduce yourselves?
Okay, excellent. So good morning, everybody, and welcome. This presentation on the establishing quality in enterprise asset management system implementations. We're recording this section, so I'm assuming you'll have access and share with your colleagues as well. So agenda for today is on the screen. We're going to introduce ourselves, talk about our background experiences. We're going to lay out the benefits of establishing the quality, committing to quality in the implementations. We're going to break it down by project phase and talk about key measure points leading into quality. We're going to talk about key opportunities for project success related to quality, and then we're going to summarize. Okay. So I'm Russ Mokers. I'm with genesissolutions, part of the ABS group. My background is in system implementations, been with companies since 2003. So work with a lot of customers, different industries, and for the last 3 years been overseeing projects and internal process improvements from quality and delivery perspective. I have a passion for calibration, so if anybody is into that, stop by and see me afterwards. We can talk about that. Since 2009, Genesis has been working with Tucson Electric Power. Trish is here with me. We had a number of projects, medium scale, large scale as well. We just completed a large implementation, very complex. Trish can talk about that. And this is where we embedded our quality program into it, and we would like to share those experiences that we went through this implementation with you. So Trish?
Hi, I'm Trish. We clearly, from what Russ just said, completed the replacement of a legacy system with Maximo in our T&D operation, the construction and maintenance part of our business. I run a support organization. I've got 6 developers. We do all the technical support for Maximo. We have 3 instances of Maximo, 2 of which are generation. 1 is T&D, the utility extension using CUE. That was a very complex process, bringing up and changing our whole CU library and our estimation and as-built process through Maximo. Russ's group, Russ of course ran the quality group. We had a bunch of Genesis people who were helping us with the integrations. We had over 40 people on the core team. We had about a third of those were consultants, the rest were SMEs.
Right.
We brought up 33 integration points. We integrated with eBiz, we integrated with our GIS system, with our customer care system, and some other small ancillary systems that we use for moving data around our new customer application process. All of that got integrated into this. It was a multi-year, multi-million dollar project, and I will take pride in the fact that we brought it in on time, under budget. So,
Very good. Most importantly, the commitment to quality
right.
that we produce is what allows to be successful, and that's what we like to focus on today. So this is just one example project, but all the general concepts will apply to any projects, and hopefully from what you hear today you can adhere to sympathize with us and be able to sell to your stakeholders that community quality will lead to these benefits that I'm showing on the screen. Satisfied user community, right? This is why we do. This is why we're here. We want to make sure that the system that we implement is user-friendly, increase productivity and effectiveness and efficiency for our users, make sure that we see those happy faces when we're done with the project. That's what we hear. The cost reduction obviously goes without saying. It hits the bottom line. Any upgrade or implementation of a new system or replacement of old system is an investment. So anything that we can do to reduce the reduce the cost of an implementation is a value add. And producing a quality system that leads to zero to no rework is one of those key points. Trish can definitely understand the pain points of the projects that the chief ran through her career, that the support model is very important. So having the quality embedded in the support process allows her team members and her team lead herself to support the system when the implementation team rolls off, right? So having it documented clearly, having it hand over properly is what drives the quality of implementation.
Part of what we're looking for is a seamless transition, so you don't even really know you've gone from project to support from a user perspective. That's what we were after.
Correct. So the expected results that you see on the screen is what's driving those benefits. So we definitely would like to meet the stakeholder expectations, bring the project on time and budget with zero rework. These are all tangible and measurable results that we run as part of quality managers. I'm sure you have quality managers in the organizations that can understand and track this as well. So embedding into the system implementation, just like producing anything else that your company is producing. Okay. So the next 3 slides is really the core presentation. This is where we're going to break down the process, give you some examples, sharing experiences from this particular project to understand how the quality process touches everything from the scope definition, which is the statement of work, all the way through post-implementation support and so forth. The way we want to approach this is from 2 sides. So I'm going to be talking from the service provider side, right, on the same topics, and then Trish in turn is going to talk about how these impact and what it require from the client perspective, right, from the company perspective. So in terms of scope definition, obviously what leads to quality is clear understanding of what the deliverable is going to be, what's in scope and what's not in scope. So for example, if we have a statement of work, we embed the process of review that statement of work before it goes to the customer. So all the team members, all the execution team members understand what they're going to be delivering. So for example, we implemented a maximum system, workflows are not in scope, but integrations are in scope, right? Okay, what does the integration mean? You have to define those assumptions. Assumptions need to be part of your statement of work. For example, we have to have access to your infrastructure. We have to have timely access to your team members on the integration side. For example, if we use middleware, there's a middleware team, right? Obviously, any integration will impact the other side of the equation. If we integrate in Oracle or SAP, JDE, there's going to be changes on that side. So documenting those assumptions clearly, and then receiving a buy-in from the customer side. This is a deliverable. This is exactly how it's going to look like and what it's going to include is the foundation for the quality implementation. And then from the client side,
You guys have all done this. It's herding cats, but basically getting the buy-in of the business for what is the true scope of this project. It's very easy from a resource perspective, from a time perspective, and from a pure scope perspective for these things to kind of run away. So it's very important for the client to really zero in and get the total agreement that leadership is going to support the project team in tracking your scope, tracking your resources, and the allocated time. All of that plays into the scope discussion, and as soon as scope kind of starts to run away, everything else, the wheels fall off. So it's very important when you sell a project to leadership that you get their commitment that they will hold to scope so that you can meet all the other goals that have been laid out in the project. Yeah.
Even though you get a buy-in from leadership/management on the scope buy-in, many times you get scope creep or scope complete runaway.
Right.
So what did you do to prevent that?
We had monthly steering committee meetings with all of our senior management, actually a couple of the C-level officers and our T&D leadership. So we had monthly steering committee meetings, and they were very open and frank conversations with what our challenges were and where we were seeing some things kind of get out of hand. And as you well know, a project team, even though you have the title lead, you are not the business. So that's always a very difficult path to tread. But we had the buy-in from our management that they would support us. And I would say to you, if you are on a project and you don't have that commitment from management, or if very early on you see that you're losing that commitment, you either need to adjust your budget or your schedule. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. You have to set the guardrails and you have to stay within them if you're going to be successful.
Right. And anytime we're talking about scope, definitions, and commitments, we also need to do a reality check. Right? The resources are finite, funding's finite, the timelines are set outside of our control. So in this particular project, we had 4 to 5 SMEs not available for us, even though they were in the plans. So we had to do some management expectations of what we can deliver, because the time was set and the funding was set.
And you always have the business pushing, oh, let's add this, let's add that. But we had the buy-in from management to say, no, we're not going to add that. This is the reality we're operating in. We're not operating in the would be, could be, wouldn't it be nice. We're operating in the this is what we have to deliver, and this is the time, and this is the budget.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The next block of items they want to talk about is the resource allocation. So from the service provider perspective, we want to make sure that we bring the right skill set, proven resources for key lead positions, and we want to make sure that we understand the customer environment, the culture, and the temperament of resources that we bring in. So from the client perspective,
we had to have our leadership commit the best resources they could give us out of an ongoing business, which, as you all know, that's a huge challenge. But getting that commitment up front was critical. And we actually did have a fairly large group of SMEs who were dedicated to the project 100% of the time. And as Russ said, we did lose a few of those over the course of the project. And we, as a team, the rest of us just kind of had to scramble to fill that in, which we did. But it's very important to make sure that the people you put on a project have the right mindset and the right temperament. Projects are demanding, they're fast-paced, they can be very stressful, and if you have people who are not oriented to that kind of a work environment, there are some issues. So getting the right people with the right mentality to buy into this project and then commit to it is absolutely critical to success.
yeah, very good point, very good point. And any projects, any industries, we're trying to suggest, it's not always possible, but to release the SMEs for the duration of the project, right? We all understand that they have to run the business. So one idea in mind is to backfill resources. Sometimes we successful, depending on the market that we have around that particular customer side of facility, that they are successful to bring in, for example, fill-in technicians. So you have to plan for that ahead of time, and then say we're going to implement the project, in Q3. So we have to start planning on bringing onboarding backfill resources in Q2, so they're properly trained and available to backfill, and then you release your SMEs.
Well, in our phase 1 of T&D, we went one step farther. We actually brought in some people way ahead of the project to work on cleaning up the work backlog out in the business, finish work orders, clean up your PMs, clean up your job plans, get all of that stuff done in front of the project. And I can't remember his name. It was one of your guys who came out and worked with T&D to clean up all of those old work orders and get us prepped for the project. So that's another strategy that will move you forward.
Right. Obviously, having dedicated resources, having the right people on the team, the people who are committed to the project and understand the project mentality will drive quality as a result. The next block of items we want to talk about is planning. So if you don't commit to the quality checks, up front and don't embed them in the plan, things will slip away, right? Everybody gets busy, there's issues come up, there's always very dynamic environment. So putting the quality checks in the project plan will guarantee that you do adhere them, because you have accountability, you have steering committees and things like that, right? So updating weekly and communicating often is important. From the service provider perspective, I'm running the quality team. What we do is we implement an internal review. So all the deliverables that are in the statement of work, we review before the customer sees it. So that's how we guarantee our quality. And then from your side,
Commitment to quality. You know, Genesis came in, they helped us identify the kind of the quality checkpoints. We, as the client, had to commit to that, and we also had to commit that we were not going to shortcut or sidestep those quality reviews. So what we did with all of our, after we got through business process and we had all our process stuff done, all of our design documentation, functional and technical, went through a full review with the vendor and our business. Required multiple sign-offs. The other commitment we made was that those documents would be kept current as we went through the rest of the project. So the vendor can come in with all of the tools to help you, but you have to have the commitment of your team that you are going to respect that agreement that you've made up front. It's the only way you're going to get to the end with quality.
agreed. Heading into the next slide, next block of items we're going to talk about is from the design perspective. So when we design a solution, from the service provider perspective, the value add to the customer is bringing in the templates, right? So whether it's a coding template, whether it's a coding tool, whether it's a report design specification, having a template with best practices embedded into it helps provide the quality product, and it's a value add to the customer. So we've done, let's see, 400 plus clients with a 97% repeat rate, so you can do the math, how many projects. So all of that is part of our knowledge base. This is our lessons learned. We embed it in the templates and we'll bring it to the client. Client benefits from that. Prototyping, right? Very important. Before we start development, we have to prototype, commit resources internally, communicate the need of prototyping and sell it is also part of the quality check. Understanding and helping envision that solution before it's built helps with making sure that all our requirements are clearly understood by the development team.
And since we were replacing a legacy system, you got a whole raft of your business users who have it's almost like, it becomes almost like a motor visceral thing where they look at the screen and they have a reaction to it and they know how to do their jobs. So now you're moving them to something that is totally unfamiliar. The conference room pilots, the prototyping, all of that work sets them up to be able to visualize and envision where they're going, and when they show up to work the day after cutover, well, they've had training, but the upfront envisioning and participation in that process is crucial to them being comfortable with what you deliver at Go Live.
Right. So this is the foundation from the design standpoint, building those prototype business scenarios based on the real life of a particular individual, or a life of a work order, or a life of a piece of equipment or material, sets the foundation. So think about prototype will lead to your unit tests. The unit tests will lead to your user acceptance testing, which in turn will become your test cases, which in turn will become your source for the training materials, right? So obviously if you skip a piece, right, then you have a broken chain and potentially may miss something. So committing time and efforts during the design phase will help you to reduce the overall time of development and any rework because of misunderstandings. Okay, so from the development standpoint, what we strive to and what we recommend you guys do as well is to embed the tools with the quality check for all the deliverables. So if you're talking about the migrating of a legacy data, right, embed the quality quantity record counts in there, embed the mapping verifications all electronically. So every time you do the dry run, which is also another tool for the ensuring the quality, you go through the process of cleaning up the data as you do those checks. We also went a couple steps ahead with this implementation. We wanted to check the format of the data. We wanted to check some of the logic between the data conversion routines. So all of that been programmatically embedded into the deliverable. Okay, you have to wait. You don't have to wait until the development is complete. In-progress checks is what will help to guarantee that you stay on track currently. So coding standards is also what's important for us when we deliver technical solutions, right? So we have to make sure that the system will be upgradable when we're done with it. So, right, so if we're running some sort of a customization, we want to keep the out-of-box framework in mind. We don't want to modify source code. We'd like to extend the class, for example, right? And then we're talking about in-progress checks. We're talking about all these quality standards. The client needs to be prepared to
Play nice. We work cooperatively with Genesis to develop all of our sort of the quality checking primarily in our data conversion. That was a huge issue for us. The data conversion was extremely complex. We had a lot of really old, crappy data. And it took us the better part of a year and a few months. We started very early developing the transformations and the routines. We developed our quality process as we went. It's kind of like it was self-informing, it was iterative. By the time we got to starting with, and the other thing we did was several dry runs where we actually picked a point in time and said, we are going to do this cutover practice, and we worked 24 hours around the clock to do that 3 separate times prior to cutover. But in that process of going through that whole thing, we had clarified our data, we'd cleaned up our data, we had accurate error logs and information so that every time we ran one of these, we could take all of our bad data or the stuff that fell out, figure out why it fell out, if it was data or if it was logic, whatever. By the time we got to cutover, we had an absolutely clean cutover. We had no data issues at the end of that. The other thing we did with our dry runs, of course, we had a bunch of test cycles in there that were also iterative, but with our dry runs, we engaged every part of the business. We had the business SMEs who were in overnight, running all of their validations. We also had to have, because we had existing work orders, we had to bring them in, we had workflows to advance them to the appropriate statuses, all of that stuff. So we had all of those people in over a 24-hour period. We had our DBAs, we had our infrastructure. Basically, everybody who had a stake in the cutover was in that process, and we did that 3 times prior to cutover. That was awesome.
Yep, highly recommended. Not everybody is able to invest that amount of time and engagement, but if you do, obviously the end result is a quality product, you know, 0 deviations, you know, clean cutover. It just becomes a day in project life versus a complete you know, nightmare dealing with issues as they appear. Documenting, very important, you know, from the quality standpoint. We want to make sure that everything is traceable from what we configured in the system, right? Think about, you know, project runs. You have all that inherent knowledge on the project team, and then the project team is disassembled. Somebody has to support the team, the product. So obviously documentation is a key. So from the service provider standpoint, we want to make sure that it's clearly laid out in the statement of work. So we're delivering to that statement of work. What are the documents going to be? What they're going to entail, right? And then from the quality perspective, we check that the document is there, that it's complete, that it's accurate, all right? And we make sure that we establish the version control, because however you slice and dice, all of the documents will be dynamic through the course of project, right? So system enhancements, user acceptance testing, any phase of the project can introduce a change. We want to make sure that we commit and dedicate the time to go and update the documentation. So at the time of go live, we have as is built documents. Doesn't have to be design, could be training as well, right? Training is impacted.
Right.
Any documentation, process flows, statement operating procedures, you name it. Okay.
So because we embedded quality up front, we had the time. That's one of the things that, as Russ and I were talking about this, having the time to ensure the accuracy and quality of those documents is key, because they will just fall off the radar if you haven't built that into your project. So that was a commitment we made up front. And when we did our estimates, so like if we had a developer and he was doing an interface, we estimated how long it took to do the interface. We had an adder for documentation, and we did that on every one of our estimates. The other thing we did was we had a database called the knowledge base. We documented all of our key business decisions, because you all know, you've gone into these projects and you're in a meeting and everybody goes, yeah, that's a key decision that we've made. 2 months later, nobody wrote it down and you don't even remember you made that decision or why you made that decision. So we documented all of our key business decisions, and those were the things that drove the rest of the project. We also had an issue tracker, and by the time we got through this thing, we had actually recorded over 1,000 issues, and I think we had resolved probably, I think it was like 90% of them, and a few were hanger-oners, because they really were things that were kind of out of scope that needed to be resolved later.
Now, when you talk about issues, was that like as a result from risk, or what was the definition of the issue?
Testing through business process, when we were doing business process design, things would crop up that we had to take back to the business and say, how do you want to handle this? So everything that was an exception, we recorded.
All right, so issue is more like an exception from the process of what happened, not necessarily from a risk that actually occurred.
Right, right.
Correct, yeah. An event that was recorded during a particular phase of a
Right.
project, right? So some could be classified. We had a committee, we had a dedicated resource who was triaging all the issues and then making assignments to the team members, whether it's a technical issue, functional issue, business issue, or whether it required a steering committee approval to proceed.
And we reported on all these issues to the steering committee, and our agreement with the steering committee was we would not go live if we had any severity 1 or 2, or like showstopper issues that hadn't been resolved. So they understood that we were going to go live with some unresolved issues, but they were by definition not significant or show-stopping. So that was an agreement we had with leadership up front.
Right.
How did you track those afterwards? Did you continue tracking those as you fixed them?
They went into Quality Center, and actually, well, you know, we did a 90-day warranty period after the project. We started chipping away at those. To be honest with you, we went live in October last year. We still have a few, but they are things that the business hasn't decided yet, so we can't move forward to mitigate.
Right. And that's an excellent point. Because you have it documented, because you already provided all the triage, you had the team members to provide you estimates, how long it's going to take, what's going to be impacted, everything is ready to go. So when the business decides that it's time to move, you embed them into what we call a rollout package, right? We'll do a release or a patch, however you want to name it, and then everything is pre-done because you already invested time and effort to do that. So really helps the support team afterward.
That's for sure.
Okay, good.
It's my world.
That's what we do, right? So next slide is talking about testing, right? So from the service provider standpoint, right, we want to automate testing as much as possible. We want to make sure that the tools are available. We can recommend the tools. We may not own the tools, but the main idea here is because we are the ones who designed and developed the solution, we need to clearly communicate to the testers. Could be the internal team, could be a third-party testers, but the service provider is the one who communicates the design solution to them clearly. That's guarantees that all the test cases are covered. And again, if we think about a couple of slides back, we started with prototyping. Prototyping led into unit testing, UAT, and so forth, system testing, performance testing, everything goes together. So from the dry run standpoint, highly recommended, and will obviously guarantee quality because you went through these issues. You already addressed some of them. So issues like unmet requirements, issues like data that doesn't fit because the data is always live. So as we go through the project, especially long-term project, data is always changing, so we want to make sure that the new data is still fit our old routines, that the logic didn't change and so forth. So
What was really cool is when we, over Go Live weekend, we actually beat our schedule by about 4 hours because we had practiced it and we'd gotten so attuned that we were actually able to come in about 4 hours earlier than we had projected. The other thing is that Russ and I were kind of talking about this. You have to agree with your implementation partner what level of testing you're going to support. How granular are you going to get? That's a key issue to being able to move to your next phase. So that's one of your key business decisions that you need to make up front with your implementation partner. You need to make sure that you have all your stakeholders and all the participants in the project. So your SMEs, you have some business users that are not necessarily on the project, but they're key. You need to get them involved, and you need to get them engaged in the process so that as you go through testing, you have the right group of people who are going to be able to say, yes, we're ready to move on. They also have to be well trained in your process, your testing process. So that's another thing you need to do up front is define your testing strategy, your test plan, and that whole process. Defect mitigation is key in here. So you need to do all that work up front so that when you get into these phases, you're not trying to figure out, now what do we do? You've got a process and you know exactly where you're going.
Very good point, thank you. From the training perspective, right, we can build the best system in the world, can be all designed, bells and whistles everywhere, but if we get to the end of the project and everything is very dynamic and everybody is extremely busy, we're getting to close to a shutdown, a monsoon season, whatever it may be, some external factors, training is the one that typically gets shortcutted. So we want to make sure that we do everything in our power, from service provider as well as from the client side to release those resources, make sure they're available, invest in good training materials that are tailored to the business processes that were through the system, not just what the system can do. It's really what the system's been designed for, and we obviously recommend to do a role-based approach, as we have it here on the slide. So if you are the plant supervisor, this is the training for you. If you're a technician, this is the training for you, plan and schedule, system administrator, things like that. If we do classroom training, typically recommend not doing more than 10-15 people in the classroom. Recommend hands-on training. If it's a self-learning, computer-based training, we want to make sure that there's appropriate support team member allocated to make sure if the person has a question or stuck on something, we can they know who to contact and get the question answered. Once we implemented the system, we always recommend to do a refresher training. Could be weeks, could be months even after the implementation, but it's an important step that we don't want to leave off. Systems, tend to be providing more functionality than what we intended use up front, right? Maybe phase 1, phase 2. So users may be curious about what other things I can do, how I can enhance my business. So some users can say, my learning curve is much greater than my peers, so I would like to have an expert come in and do a refresher training for me. So all of those factors will drive this, and then obviously will drive the satisfaction of user community. All right, if we didn't have the training, we wouldn't see that. If we didn't invest in proper training, we wouldn't see reduction of the overall cost of implementation. It will come and hit us towards the end of the project. And then from the support standpoint, same thing, right? You're here to support technical issues, work on the next patch releases. You're not there to address the training issues, right, necessarily. Typically the internal teams are not set up for let's say hundreds of users support issues from the training perspective, right? That's the job of the trainers.
So I will say a couple of words to you from the client side. Job aids, leadership commitment to have the people there, accountability for the people once they've been scheduled, held accountable to show up. And then the other thing we did that was very successful is we had like a 30-day post-implementation, sort of like a SWAT team that was on call for people to call us and say, how do I do this? I don't understand this. So we had a group of people who were just waiting for phone calls to go out and help people after all the training had been done. So SWAT team, job aids, commitment, and accountability. Those are the things that will drive your training success.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Last but not least here is the support, right? So we've implemented solution, could be multi-year implementation. All that knowledge stays with the project team, right? Before it's disassembled, we want to make sure we allocate appropriate amount of time needed to hand over that support. Includes documentation, knowledge transfer of all the project artifacts, per the statement of work, as well as any open items, right? Trish mentioned, there's always something that's pending decision or being put on a placeholder, phase 2 type of action item. So those needs to be also communicated and transitioned.
We kept the technical and business, not the SMEs, but we have what we call BPA's business process analysts on the side of the business. There's a group of them who are kind of like the technical counterparts. That team stayed intact all the way through the end of January. Some of the technical consultants rolled off right around Christmas, but we kept a group of people that were available through the end of January in full support mode. And I would highly recommend doing that if you can. It provides continuity. It also sets you up for the ongoing support, so it's not like this all of a sudden on day one, project is done and now you're in support mode without the resources that develop the tool. So I would highly recommend that.
So did you pull people out of the operation, or did you hire contractors off the street for this, this support?
We actually kept the technical contractors on until the end of December. As I said, we have a group of people who are called BPAs in our organization. They actually report to T&D, but their function is to liaise between IT and the business. So we have that as a dedicated, and that's a full-time job. That's a whole bunch of people that have been there before this project. So that whole group, and we work very closely, my technical team works hand in hand with that group of BPAs. So we did have technical contractors, and they were carefully scrutinized, resumes studied. We looked for cultural fit, we looked for technical skills, we looked for business understanding. So it was, in my estimation, a very highly functioning team. And we kept that intact until the end of December. Then we had a couple of contractors that stayed until the end of January.
Functional and technical.
Right, all the way through. And the other thing we did that I just think is so cool, we modified Maximo, we modified the SR application to actually support our change control process. So when people have issues, they create an SR and they assign it to the support teams. So we're no longer using QC. We got all of our issues in QC resolved. The ones that are still open, we moved into SRs, and we now use Maximo to manage our support.
Like an email listener that created the service request?
We have just service desk. It's open to all users, and all they have to do is get into Maximo and do their self-service, and it works great.
Yeah, got the tool, why not use it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Are you doing that too?
Yes.
It's awesome.
Excellent. So one point to add here is, from our standpoint, we are ready to hand over the deliverables, the knowledge from the client side. They need to be able to receive. So again, it's dedicating the time, right? Allocating the resources and dedicating the time. If it's the trainer who will be, supporting the system afterwards, they need to be assigned and allocated. If it's a technical, integration support lead, same thing, right?
Right.
Okay, very good. Any questions here? No? Go ahead.
How many SMAs and users did you have?
In the T&D instance, 450. Concurrent, we're experiencing in the vicinity of 80 to 100 concurrent. We're in a clustered environment. We had to do that for performance. Overall, across all of our instances, we're over 1,000 operational people using Maximo to do their work. Probably not huge by a lot of standards, but it's a lot to support.
How many SMAs did you have during the project?
How many what?
SMEs.
done the testing?
We had, on our T&D project, we had in the vicinity of 15 full-time SMEs. We had a couple of other SMEs that were sort of like targeted to specific areas like reporting was one of them. We had a SME that was targeted to supporting the development of our training. And then we had, I don't know, 15 or so technical people. So, and then we had some other kind of like ancillary SMEs who were not full-time,
Right.
but they were dedicated at least like half-time to support us.
What kind of tool do you use for automation?
Interestingly, we have a contract with Cognizant for some of our, actually they work on the CC&B side of the house, but they have a proprietary tool that they have developed. And so we were hard pressed. We did a project for T&D back in 2012, and it was substations, protective goods, transmission, some other stuff. They were already in the instance. This project actually had to merge that instance with all this new stuff. So we developed test automation scripts to test all the phase 1 stuff. And that proved to be an absolute lifesaver, because the developers who were developing for this instance really didn't know the phase 1 stuff, and so they took stuff off the screens, so every night we would run our automation scripts and identify all of the places where they had made bad impact on phase 1. So that was an absolutely immensely valuable exercise for us.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a number of tools out there,
Yeah.
but ability to embed them, put them in the process will be a
Yep.
great benefit.
It will pay dividends.
Oh, yeah. Big time. Okay.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got a
right,
couple of
understood.
slides. Very, very good.
So from the business side of this project, it is absolutely essential for you to commit to quality. If you're not going to commit to it, then factor that into your estimate, your budget, and your schedule. If you're going to have a very tight schedule and a very tight budget, you have to commit to it, and you have to get your management to commit. You have to embed quality in everything you do, from the day everybody walks in the door to start the project. Understand where your quality checkpoints are, commit to them, and just make sure that you have it like from as is all the way through delivery. And I will tell you, this is not a popular thing. It is not hard, or it's very hard to sell. But I have kind of a philosophy. You've got X amount of work to do. You're either going to pay for it up front, or you're going to pay for it on the tail end. The problem with paying for it on the tail end is that it's in support mode that you pay for that, and it goes on and on and on. I've lived it. So while it was not a popular decision, we felt that it was a necessary decision, and as I said, we built it into everything we did. The other thing I will tell you is you better find the right person to be your quality czar. Russ did a very, I think, invaluable service to us. He just constantly combing through the documents, combing through the processes. I was the technical lead on the project, so I was kind of combing through all the interface stuff and the data conversion stuff. I didn't have time to do all the functional stuff. So Russ came in and became that person, and I can't tell you how many little zinger emails I got. Who did this? Who did that? When's this document going to be turned around? And he was like the little dog at your heel. But the work got done, and it was very high quality work, and I'm very proud of everything we accomplished.
Very good. Thank you, Trish. So to summarize everything we talked about, if we embed the quality processes, if we commit and we get the buy-in from the stakeholders, from the team members, assign the right personnel from the service provider team, from the customer side, we will achieve this. These are achievables. The last 3 bullet points is actually, my life for the past 3 years. These are measurable, and these are to report on, all the way to senior management. That's how we track our program. This is how, I get my bonus. So, imagine a number of projects that we run. We got projects that last 2 days. We have projects that last, multiple years. So, all of those quality tasks that we talk about in mind apply to all of them, right? To one degree or another, but they're all transferable. So hopefully you can take them, share experiences, don't repeat our lessons learned, and get the get the ideas to your stakeholders, to your senior management, and embed the quality in your projects. So leave you with the contact information. Please feel free to email us or stop by the Genesis booth, talk to us. Any questions at this point?
Good luck, everybody.